Thank you all for being here on this wonderful but cold day. Happy holidays, Happy New Year. I'll tell you, we're really thrilled to be here for a few reasons. But as we're about to tell you, the economy's going to get a pretty good report card. Argent's got a pretty good report card. We have two excellent speakers from the Secret Service who are really passionate, knowledgeable, and I think you'll really enjoy what they have to say. Just a level set, because this is the first time we've ever had a luncheon where we literally had to turn people away who RSVP'd yes. There was such demand for this that you guys were the fast ones. You got in early. But there are a lot of new faces here. As Argent's grown, we're now past $4 billion in assets. There are new faces here. So I just wanted to spend a couple minutes level setting, making sure we're all on the same page before we get going. So for those that don't know me, I'm Logan Finerty. I'm your MC today. I'll be talking a little bit about Argent and performance. Following me will be Jed Ellerbroek, who's our large cap portfolio manager. He's going to be talking about our economic outlook, what we're seeing in portfolios, and also how does the election change things for both the economy and our portfolios. And finally, we have the Secret Service, who I'll do a longer introduction in a bit, but they're truly phenomenal human beings, so we're really honored to have them here. So let's get to it. Argent. Argent was formed in 1998. We are a stock management company, so we buy individual stocks or shares of companies. And there are 5 strategies, and they generally differ just based off of size. So we have a strategy to buy big companies, we have a strategy to buy smaller companies, and then stuff in the middle. That's the big differences. But across those strategies, whether they're big or small, the way we invest is the same. And we like to call that buying an enduring business. And the way I internalize what an enduring business means is if I was going to buy a company for my own family for generations, what would I be looking for? Well, I want a company that's going to do really well in up markets, but also be able to withstand things like COVID that come out of nowhere, and recessions and things like that. So we want to own it for the long term. We want a cash flow generator, and we want that to be increasing cash flows year after year. We want a stellar management team. We'd like some sort of competitive advantage. And if we can get that all at an attractive price, that's when it goes into Argent portfolios. So that's a quick background on what Argent is. And let's look briefly at performance. So the green on the screen is the benchmark return, or the average return. And this goes across what we call market cap, the different size companies you can invest in. And you can see on average over the last year, the average stock is up about 35%. They're all roughly the same, but about 35%. When you look at Argent performance in yellow, you can see we've been fortunate. And our average over the last year is close to 40%. And we're very proud of that. Hopefully you guys as Argent investors are proud of that and enjoying the fruits of those returns. We did want to note, mid-cap has had unusually good performance. For the last 5 years and the last 10 years, it's literally number 1 in terms of percentile. It's ranked by Morningstar over the last 5 and 10 years. And as no big surprise, when you get a fund that's number 1, that's where a lot of the growth has been in terms of new assets. The other thing that's helped mid-cap is that there's an ETF for mid-cap. So what you can do is an ETF is just like a mutual fund. You get a lot of shares of stock behind it, but you have one security to own all those shares. It does make, we think, a tremendous holiday present. I know Steve's doing it for his granddaughters. So if you have the opportunity, please keep that in mind. And with that, I will invite up Jed Ellerbroek, again, to talk to the economy, performance, and also about the presidential election. Jed?
Awesome. Thanks, Logan, and thank you all for being here today. I'm going to talk about 3 things today. First, the market's reaction to President Trump's victory. Second, we'll cover some highs and lows from Argent's large cap portfolio this year. And then finally, just kind of reset on the state of the stock market today and our outlook given 2 awesome years in a row. So let's get started. President Trump has some big plans for his second term. In his first term, he was an aggressive user of tariffs. In fact, he says it's the most beautiful word in the dictionary. I don't know, love, family. I have a 1-year-old. His favorite word is no. Anyways, here's President Trump last weekend on Meet the Press talking about his favorite word.
I'm a big believer in tariffs. I think tariffs are the most beautiful word. I think they're beautiful. It's going to make us rich.
It's going to make us rich, guys. The stock market isn't a huge fan of tariffs. Tariffs raise prices on end consumers, causing those end consumers to spend less, slowing down our economy, and the stock market's not a big fan of that. So, industrial companies in the market today are kind of on watch for those coming in the future. Next, deregulation. Finance companies, energy businesses, materials companies, all really excited about the prospect of deregulation. One example, the Biden administration implemented a bunch of new rules that restricted mergers and acquisitions across the economy. President Trump plans to tear those up on his first day. And then third, tax policy. In Trump's first term, he enacted a very large tax cut that reduced taxes and boosted corporate earnings by 20%. That was a huge change. Those tax cuts expire next year, and he wants to reduce them further, or at least lock them in at today's low level. Now let's look at a couple industries in particular, starting with financials. This is the day after the election. So Trump was declared the winner. The S&P 500 was up a lot that day, up a little more than 2%. And here we show you a couple select financial businesses. Both these are owned by Argent strategies. Blackstone is owned by both our large cap and our dividend select strategies, while JP Morgan is the largest holding in our dividend select portfolio. Blackstone was up 4% that day, a big move. It was up because of those M&A restrictions, mergers and acquisition restrictions going away. JP Morgan was up even more, over 11%. Investors there are excited about looser capital restrictions, which would allow them to pay more in dividends to their shareholders or invest more in the company's growth. That 11% move in one day is a $70 billion increase in their market value. So really like a consequential reaction in the market. Now, looking in the other direction, healthcare stocks have been weak for most of 2024. And here we show you a 3-month period starting just before the election, going through just last week. As you can see over that period, the S&P 500 is up almost 10%. And these two are down quite a bit. Centene is a locally headquartered business that specializes in Medicaid coverage. Republicans who will control Washington in January intend to cut Medicaid benefits after they were boosted by the Biden administration and during COVID. Eli Lilly, meanwhile, that stock is down almost 16% over that period, and it's down because they are the biggest manufacturer of the new weight loss drugs. And President Trump's Health and Human Services Secretary nominee, RFK Jr., is an outspoken critic of those weight loss drugs. That 16% drop in Lilly is a $170 billion decline in its market value. And then third, President Trump created the Department of Government Efficiency. It's going to be led by Elon Musk, and the goal is to get federal spending down. Federal spending today is well in excess of federal income. So it shouldn't be that hard, right? Let's just get spending in line with income. But if you actually look at the federal budget, there's more to the story. Let's look at each of these pieces. Interest on the debt. It's going up in the future. As we said, there is a deficit, which means the debt goes up every year, which means the interest expense goes up every year. Defense spending, more likely to rise than fall. We're still engaged in some regional conflicts around the globe, and we're investing more to counter China across Asia. And then the entitlement programs. President Trump is committed not to cut Social Security or raise retirement ages. The aging of America ensures then that Social Security spending will keep rising. And then finally, health insurance. Same story. Medicare expenditures, Medicare Advantage. Those spending amounts are going up each year, not down. There will be Medicaid cuts, like I mentioned, but that's a pretty small piece of that health insurance section. So 70% of the budget is going up a little bit in spending, not down, which is going to place a lot of pressure on that remaining 30%, which includes a lot of vital and valued government services, things like the Department of Veterans Affairs or the Food and Drug Administration, all kinds of things. It's easier said than done. Okay, now, so Argent's large cap portfolio. Amazon is our best performer this year. Alexa, will you show us Amazon's stock price this year?
Generating Amazon stock pricing.
Awesome, thanks. So Amazon's been our best idea for the last 18 months, and the stock has delivered. It's been one of our best performers. How many of you have bought something from Amazon and received the package here in the last week or so? Too many of us? All of us? Me included? Yeah, so Amazon's retail business is doing tremendously well. It's the only large retailer in America that's growing its revenue by double digits year after year after year. And that's great. But what we like most about Amazon is their other business called Amazon Web Services. That business provides all kinds of kind of back-end technology resources to businesses, things like data storage, compute power, cybersecurity, all kinds of things. And that business is growing 20% per year these days. Currently, all the new AI tools and capabilities are a big part of that growth, and we expect that to continue for the next decade or longer, which is why Amazon remains our largest holding in the large cap fund and our very best idea. On the flip side is Align Technologies. Align is the maker of Invisalign clear aligners. Here's somebody with traditional wire and bracket braces. No, that's not a picture of me as a child. It's from a movie. And then here on the right is somebody with a clear aligner. Every year, more and more people are using clear aligners and fewer people are using bracket and wire braces. So what's the problem? The problem has been demand has been falling lately, and that's largely due to interest rates rising. 1/3 of people that get Invisalign treatments finance those purchases, and higher interest rates means that financing costs more. Thus, fewer people are doing it. As you can see, the stock has responded to that by declining, which is obviously not the goal. We think, though, that better times are coming, largely due to two factors. The first, interest rates have started to fall. They're down 75 basis points in the last couple months. The Fed's going to reduce interest rates another 25 basis points next week, with more expected in 2025. And the other positive factor is that this weak period over the last year has hurt Invisalign's competitors more than Invisalign, which is the biggest, most capable, most innovative company in the industry. So we think that the turn in demand is going to make Invisalign a disproportionate beneficiary when that happens, and we hope and expect it will be in 2025. Now let's talk about the stock market more broadly. Here's a 25-year history of stock market returns. As you can see, our average is a shade more than 9%, which is great. But if you zoom in to the last 5 years, what you'll see are even better returns, almost 16% annualized, which is amazing because it includes that big down year in 2022 that most of us have forgotten about by now. That's one amazing thing about the markets. Even if you invest just before a big down year like 2022, you can still accomplish pretty good returns if you buy and hold for the long term. If you invested just before that big drop in 2022, you would already be back ahead thanks to the last 2 years where returns have exceeded 20% each year. These great returns recently, though, might make you cautious going forward or looking forward. And let's talk about that now. I think there's some positives and negatives to consider. Let's start with the negatives. Valuation has risen, and today is at a 15-year high. You can see this blue line. This is the valuation for the S&P 500. When I say valuation, I want you to think about what valuation means is it is the price you pay in the market today for $1 of profit. So higher is worse, obviously. I'd rather buy my apples at the grocery store for $5 than $25. So we're at 15-year highs today, which seems like a problem, but there are a couple ways to view this, and let me show you another way. The gray line shows you the same S&P 500, just weighted differently. So the blue line weights those 500 companies by their market cap. So the biggest companies, the Apples and Microsofts of the world, have a much bigger weight, 5 times or 10 times more, than medium-sized companies like, say, Home Depot and Lowe's. In contrast, that gray line shows you The same companies, just weighted equally. So Apple and Microsoft, the same as our Home Depot and Lowe's. And when you do it that way, you see a much different picture. Valuation might be a little elevated, but not to a degree that makes you concerned or prohibits future investment. And that's how Argent prefers to view it. We are searching for companies every day on an individual one-by-one basis, and we're not required to, look exclusively at the companies that pull that blue line up, which are those big tech companies that are called the Magnificent Seven today. Okay, so now a couple positives. Corporate earnings are really strong. In 2023, the S&P 500 grew its earnings 3% year over year. This year, up to 10%, so that's good. Acceleration is good. Next year, the forecast is 15%, even better. Why is that happening? The last couple of years, almost all of the growth in the S&P 500 earnings was due to those big tech companies. The rest of the market, financials, industrial companies, consumer companies, weren't really growing their earnings much, if at all. But looking forward in 2025, the expectation is that earnings growth is going to broaden out. Our biggest tech companies are going to continue growing, but we're also going to see growth from banks and industrial companies and retailers. And that's great news. Second, consumer spending continues to rise steadily. The stock market is at all-time highs. That gives people confidence. All of our home values continue to appreciate and are at levels none of us ever even really considered possible. And inflation has gotten under control. It hasn't stopped, of course, entirely, but it's no longer a major issue. And then third, I mentioned earlier that interest rates are down. It's hard to overstate how important interest rates are for the stock market. Businesses, obviously, businesses that can finance their debt at lower rates is good news. And then third, it's better for consumers too. How many of you have taken out a mortgage and would love to refinance down by 100 basis points or something and save that couple $100? Last, when Argent's investment team is out looking for new investments today, we're finding plenty of reasonably priced, well-managed, growing companies, and that's what gives us optimism going forward. So with that, Logan, I'll turn it back to you.
Is the mic working? Okay. To be honest, I didn't hear anything Jed said because about 30 seconds into it, I poured water down my front and just drowned my microphone. It reminded me in high school, I gave a whole big speech in front of the whole class, which Brummers are here. It's only 100 kids, but I had all sorts of stuff in my teeth after and haven't forgot about it. And now that I'm drenched in water, I think this is going to be one that I remember. But kudos on your microphones working. I did want to take a quick note to mention that for Jed's large cap strategy, also for our small cap strategy, we hope to launch 2 additional ETFs. So similar to the mid cap strategy having an ETF, the large cap strategy and small cap should be added sometime in the first half of this year, which is really exciting, but not as exciting as our next 2 speakers. So I've actually been shocked. So Tim Reboulet is the connection, I guess. And yesterday I told a story about how I met Tim at a gym. It was my only time going there. I was failed miserably. I was literally face down on this dirty, sweaty floor, and Tim was ripping out one-handed push-ups with a look of concern on his face for my well-being, not his. I had no idea that he was a Secret Service agent, and at the time. And I thought that was a funny story. It was much longer. And afterwards, I go, my mom was here, and I go, Mom, how was the presentation? She goes, it would have been a whole lot better if Tim did the one-hand push-ups. It's like, thanks, Mom. But so Tim was in law enforcement. Tim Reboulet was in law enforcement. Let's get the, there we go. Was in law enforcement for 25 years. Special agent for the Secret Service for 22 years. He protected 5 presidents, many foreign dignitaries that you're about to hear about. And today, maybe more importantly to you, he's in charge of safety and security for the Ladue School District. In his free time, which I can't imagine having much with several little kids and that job, but also he does cyber counterterrorism, which sounds exciting. Don't really know what that is, but sounds exciting. And then Mike Matranga is actually up here from Texas. He has served every living president, every living vice president, and their families. He's been in over 33 countries, 3 war zones, and upon retirement started a company called M6 Global Defense, which consults for schools, keeping them safe, petrochemical plants, pharmaceutical plants, corporate facilities. And as you might imagine, after the United Healthcare CEO's assassination, his phone's been ringing off the hook for the past couple of weeks, so we appreciate him still making time for us even during this busy period. So let's have a warm welcome for Tim and Mike.
Gonna lie, I was sitting next to Logan, and I saw that water spill. It was too easy. I just let it go, but I could have made him feel really bad, but I just I don't have the time right now. So, like you said, Mike Matranga, he's a good friend, longtime friend, and colleague of mine, and he's up from warm Houston, Texas. So he came up. So what did I do as a St. Louis guy? I took him and I introduced him to gooey butter cake. And I took him to a hockey game. Texans don't know anything about hockey. Nope. So we went to the Blues game last night. It was awesome. Within the first 2 minutes, there was a fight. So he's like, this is cool.
Yeah,
so
it was good.
I'm indoctrinating him as a St. Louis. And I succeeded because he's like, man, I could live up in this place. So other than the cold temperature. So anyway, I was listening a lot. The last 2 days, I've learned a lot financially. And being a retired government employee, hopefully the Doge doesn't touch my pension. And also, I'm really excited about the market because I have everything in my TSP, my thrift savings plan. So hopefully it keeps ticking up, and ticking up.
I think you should transfer it over to Argent. And let them
I
handle it.
should, yeah.
See?
I think they got me, yeah. As long as I'm not taxed. So anyway, we have some time here. We have about an hour. So I'm going to get through. I want to get a baseline. We'll go through a quick slideshow here to give you a baseline of the U.S. Secret Service. Then we want to open up to questions because I know since July 13th, everybody has questions about the assassination attempt or anything you have. I had a conversation about defensive tactics before this started, and we'll answer any questions you have. So. Yesterday, somebody, I'm sorry. Most importantly, let's stand up real quick and honor the flag. Yeah. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. How I was raised, and it's in our DNA, God, country, and family. So we would, we'll get into it, but Mike and I would, die for that flag and what the Constitution represents, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And that leads me into.
Well, I just want to point out that before we got started, we were told that this was the livelier group of the 2 days. So you guys have a lot of living up to do. We'll see how this works out, all right? Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. So I always like to start with this quote. This is my favorite quote, and I'll explain a little bit as we get going. But as a young guy, and I had a calling, and I wanted to be a part of the solution. So this is worth reading. The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do the evil, but because of those who. I'm sorry, not because of those who do the evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing about it. And that's obviously Einstein during World War II. But that's kind of what drives me and drives us every day. I want to be the guy that helps to do something about it and help people that can't help themselves. So that's why we went from the Secret Service, and now we're both our new mission in life, going protecting the President of the United States, is now keeping America's treasure safe, and those are our children in schools. So that's what drives us every day. Real quick, I bring up this photo, one, because I'm driving that car right there. That's January 20th, 2009. And the cool thing about that day was 10:30 a.m. I loaded up President Bush and President-elect Obama with their wives in the vehicle. We drove the 1.8 miles from the White House to the Capitol. And about 2:30 p.m., we're coming back down Pennsylvania Avenue in the presidential inauguration. And that goes to show you, like, this country, obviously we all love it, but the peaceful transition of power and what sets us apart as Americans in the United States. Interesting personal side story. Some people in here know me, and they know my wife. We had just met right around this time, And I really wanted to, get in her good graces. And she worked for President Bush 43. So she had just done his departure ceremony from Andrews Air Force Base. And she texts me right about that location and says, "Where are you?" And I respond, 15th and Penn, Pennsylvania Avenue. And it took her a second. She's like, "What are you doing? You're in the motorcade. Why are you texting me?" So what happened when I texted her, she's like, how did you text me? So I'm driving, I see the text. We've all done it. You have the phone. I'm like, "Oh my God, it's Whitney." So I go down and I'm driving with my knees. I text her and I felt a presence outside the window. I look, it's the director of the U.S. Secret Service, Mark Sullivan, because that's the part where everybody's walking. He was in such disbelief. He looks and he looks away like, "No, I didn't see that." By the time he turns back, I'm like, never was asked about it again. So Jedi mind trick. But anyway, I'm married to that same girl right now, so it worked. Again, this is our motto, worthy of trust and confidence, and these are our core principles. And again, this is a guiding principle of what we did and what we did for a career every day, worthy of trust and confidence, and all these guiding principles with the U.S. Secret Service. I like to start, I know July 13th happened. I know a lot of folks remember this. This was a driving force, with me at least, March 30th, 1981, the Reagan assassination attempt. I was 6 years old, and it had a direct effect on me, and I knew I wanted to do something to be a part of the solution, and I wanted to be a Secret Service agent. But we'll watch it real quick, and we'll talk about some of the things that happen as we go on.
Hotel in Washington, D.C. Hinckley caught up with his target.
And I don't think there was a better demonstration of how that training worked than the assassination attempt against President Reagan. Judge Jerry Parr and Ray Shattuck, as soon as that first shot goes off, they grab the president and they throw him into the car.
Agent Tim McCarthy shielded Reagan with his body, taking a bullet in the process. Within moments, the limo sped away from a scene of chaos. Hinckley was buried under a mountain of Secret Service agents.
Okay, I wanted to show you that because it's really important as it relates to what July 13th and on. So Hinckley was 15 feet away. Obviously, we had open arrivals. That was a failure, by the way. But the Secret Service became better, and we learned from it. And that's what's going to happen July 13th moving forward. As agents, we watched that video ad nauseum. What happened on July 13th, agents are going to watch that video as long as the Secret Service exists, because we learn, and we learn from the mistakes, we learn from the tactics. As you saw McCarthy, Tim McCarthy, the agent, that's what we're here to do. Take one for the team. You know, first question they ask you when you apply for the U.S. Secret Service, will you take a bullet for the President of the United States? And it has to be a resounding yes. If it's not, see you next, we'll try somebody else. And it's not Republican, it's not Democratic, it's the president. The office of the president's greater than one person. And we signed up, and Tim McCarthy did his job that day, just like July 13th, those agents did their job. But Hinckley, 15 feet away, double action revolver. Anybody that shoots takes a little trigger squeeze to get that double action going. 1.8 seconds, 6 rounds down range, 5 of them hit their target. 3 human beings, 1 hit the A-frame of the vehicle, ricocheted. Jerry Parr, the special agent in charge, felt guilty because he pushed Reagan into that deflecting bullet that hit him. And then obviously Jerry Parr saved his life, did the assessment on the way. They were going back to the White House. Didn't see any wounds, started frothing at the mouth, and they showed up to GW. They called GW en route, George Washington Hospital. They got hung up on because the hospital's like, we're being pranked. They show up, Reagan gets out of the car, the rest is history. So I just think it's important to show that.
One thing I want to point out here, that when you saw McCarthy pushing Reagan into the limo, what is the one thing you didn't see there? It's kind of a trick question. He didn't stop to get his shoe, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I thought I'd like to point that out. He didn't stop to get his shoe, and that was a question that we had yesterday. And you know, the question was, why did that happen? Well, in these events, when you're you know, in a high stress level, you do all kinds of really weird things. And so the question should be to President, or now incoming President Trump. Why did you stop to get your shoe? Why did you feel that was an imperative at that time? So, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll throw it to
I
you.
thought I'd throw out a little comedy there, right?
I'll Pat to get a little quick introduction for you there.
Yeah. So in this photo here, this was actually my last day on the job. So I was one of the first agents assigned to was then Senator Barack Obama in 2007, May 3rd of 2007. I can't remember what I ate yesterday, but I remember that day. So May 3rd of 2007, and so I did that full 18-month campaign detail with him and his family and really got to know them well. I came back to Houston for about a year and a half and then went into protective intelligence cases, investigating threats against the president and any of our protectees, which is what my passion really is. Yes, I'm a tactically oriented person, but I really enjoy examining why people do the things that they do. For example, I'm really fascinated with Mr. Mangione, who assassinated the CEO of United Healthcare. I'm waiting for those developments to come out to see what his triggers were. And I think just in the short period of time, we've seen that all of those signs and symptoms of those pre-attack behaviors were there. It's just we did not have the courage, or someone did not have the courage to intervene. And so what I'm telling you is that regardless if it's Brian Thompson, who was assassinated last week, or if it was this case right here with Hinckley that we just showed you, there's always signs and symptoms. We have to be observant as people to know when to intervene and have resources there. So on this day, this is my last day. I ended up going to the Presidential Counter-Assault Team, which is an elite group of individuals within the United States Secret Service. We were formed in 1979 by the Secret Service and Delta Force. There's been about 650 of us. This lapel pin that I have here is a replica of our official logo. I'm number 476, and like I said, we're at about 650 now. Real quick, going through these photos, just a little personal history. Here is myself with President Bush at the 50-year anniversary of the Bloody Sunday March in Selma, Alabama. There's a whole story behind that one I'll be happy to talk to you guys about. Here is a photo with my wife and children in the Oval Office at my departure photo. I have a whole lot of funny stories as well on that one as well, but this one is a famous photo that hung outside of the Oval Office. In this photo, you can't see her. She's outside of the frame, is Susan Rice, who was the National Security Advisor, and then her assistant, Lisa Monaco, and we're in the green room of the White House. I'm in the East Room. Little tidbit of history, that painting behind me there is one of only two paintings that was saved during the War of 1812 when the Brits burned down the White House. But on that day, it was the French and Belgian presidents calling the president, telling him that they had captured the last ISIS attacker at the Bataclan shooting. And so he was given a weekly radio address. They came in, they interrupted, and he was on the phone with them. And then to the left here is the Tom Harkin steak fry. This was the day in 2007 that I personally knew that he was going to win the presidency. We spent a lot of time with these people. You kind of have a good gauge of who's going to win, who's not going to win, and understanding the campaigns. That was the Tom Harkin steak fry. And then this photo to the left with me in it and him on the stage, does anyone recall the controversy surrounding that photo early on in about September 2007? Anyone recall what the issue was in that photo? It's right there in your face. Anybody? No? So that caused a big controversy in the mainstream media because he didn't have his hand over his heart when they were singing the pledge. I had some individuals, the photo that the media showed didn't have me in it, but I had some arguments with some friends of mine who basically said he was un-American, and I argued that he did say the national anthem. I heard it myself because I was in the photo. That's the original. And then down here is at Camp David with the Russian Special Forces unit, where we did joint movements at Camp David with those individuals. So just a little tidbit of information. I'd love to have conversations with you guys afterwards.
And I just want to go back before I'm just going to talk about a couple things here. Mike mentioned the protective intelligence or the proactive side of what we've done, as Secret Service agents to protect the president. Last year alone, 7,000 threats towards the President of the United States that the U.S. Secret Service investigated. Yes, we had a major failure on July 13th, but 7,000 threats that men and women of the U.S. Secret Service investigated worldwide. And that's what has made us successful for 159 years, is investigating those threats. And what Mike and I are doing now, we're using that same methodology to keep kids safe, the proactive measures and assessing the mental health and such to keep American kids safe in schools. But I'll go through it real quick. This guy, everybody, I don't go back to this here. This guy here, you know who that is? Shinzo Abe. He was Prime Minister of Japan from 2012 to 2020. I came off the president's detail in 2011, and a lot of people don't realize by law, Title 18, 3056, we have to protect the president, the vice president, and their families and any foreign head of state. Obviously, he's a foreign head of state. So when he came over, I was his guy for 8 years. Every time he stepped foot on American soil, we protect them by law. And I got to know him really well. I was with him every March. My birthday's in March. He used to sing me happy birthday. I had a personal connection with him. July 7, 2022, he was assassinated in Japan. Tokyo Metropolitan Police protects the Prime Minister of Japan. It would be like NYPD protecting the President of the United States. They're good guys, but they dropped their rear coverage. A guy with a homemade weapon came up and shot Shinzo Abe twice and killed him. So I just wanted to let you know, that quick story about that. And again, protectees. The reason why I show this, Bush, I was a young guy back then, but whatever the protectee does, we do with them. He was a runner. I'm a marathoner. I'm a triathlete. So we used to run with them. Obviously, I go golfing with these guys, basketball. Bush, later in his presidency, became a mountain biker, so we'd mountain bike with them. So whatever they're doing, we let them live, be human beings, but they also need protection as well.
And I will tell you, the reason why I don't golf today is because there's nothing worse than going every weekend and watching someone who's terrible at playing golf play golf. And so I was on the golf course every weekend with President Obama. He did get better. It took him 8 years, but it was brutal. So about year 3, I sold my clubs. I said I want nothing to do with this sport.
I will follow up on that. He was horrible, and if we're the element ahead, we're always one terrain feature ahead. I'm just saying, you may have a ball in your pocket to speed up play, like Caddyshack.
Wow, that was a good shot, sir.
Yeah, so.
You're going to bogey this hole.
Yeah.
Wow, I've never done that before. Yeah.
Whatever it takes, There's some people that know me, that's my wife. That was my departure photo with Obama in the Oval. And, obviously everybody knows this guy. I actually have 3 kids. She didn't make the cut that day, but there you go. But again, quick history. I think it's important. And again, like I said, I love quotes. Great Mark Twain quote. I'm not going to read it for you. You could read it. You need to know the history of the U.S. Secret Service. So April 15th, 1865, the last act Abraham Lincoln performed before he went to Ford's Theater and he ultimately was assassinated. Ironically, he created the U.S. Secret Service. Because at the time, April of 1865, the biggest threat to the U.S. economy was counterfeit currency. And the U.S. dollar wasn't even worth the paper that it was printed on. They're like, we have a problem. Lincoln said, all right, we're going to create, under the Treasury Department, a secret, here's a trivia question if you ever go on Jeopardy, a secret group of operatives and a secret service within the Treasury Department. So that's how we got our name. We were a secret service within the Treasury Department to infiltrate counterfeit rings. He left, he never left Fort Theater, but he got assassinated, 1881. Garfield was assassinated. 1901, McKinley was assassinated. So Congress said, we have a problem. 36 years, 3 presidents dead. What do we do? At the time, Park Police, U.S. Marshals, and Secret Service were the only federal law enforcement in existence. They said, Secret Service, start protecting the president. In 1908, Roosevelt lent 8 Secret Service operatives to the Justice Department. Thank you, FBI. That's how you got your start. So we have a friendly rivalry with the FBI, and I like to remind my FBI friends, you started because of the Secret Service, and you're welcome. So
and since 1901, Congress hasn't done anything good. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
But real quick, and the history is important. So 1901, we became protected the president, but it wasn't until 1951. So typical Congress. It took about 50 years before it became law Oh, by the way, here's law, Secret Service, you officially protect the president. Then everybody knows what happened in 1968. RFK was assassinated. Presidential candidates before RFK did not get presidential protection. After RFK was assassinated, it was written in our statute, Title 18, 3056, any major presidential candidate within 120 days of the election gets Secret Service. And it's deemed who gets it by the Secretary of DHS, the House Majority Whip, and the Minority Whip. So we don't decide who does get it. Once they're eligible, those folks decide. So 68 is important.
Real quick. And the president can dictate that alone by himself, but sometimes he doesn't. Just for example, as this last election was ongoing, RFK Jr. had been fighting for over a year to get Secret Service protection. I believe that the intelligence was there for him to receive that Secret Service protection, but it wasn't until the assassination attempt on July 13th that Congress and the president and those powers that be actually granted him protection for 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks before he dropped out and joined the Trump campaign. So that's important to note as well.
Yeah, I mentioned everybody knows what happened 9/11/01. We lost somebody. Our field office was World Trade Number 7. Came down at 5 o'clock that afternoon. We lost somebody with the Secret Service that day. He was helping save people from Tower 2. And I mentioned that too because and I'm not looking for a pat on the back, but I was at the Pentagon that day, so. It really obviously is a big deal to everybody, but it has a personal effect on all of us. March 1st, 2003, the worst thing that happened to the Secret Service after 137 years under Treasury, we went to DHS, and we'll talk about that. We were the only show in town under Treasury. Then for the last 21 years, I'm bad at math, 21 years, we. Part of DHS, we're one of 22 other agencies, so we kind of got lost in the shuffle, and I will explain a little bit about that. Then obviously everybody knows what happened July 13th, and I will mention September 15th. That was the other, I don't call it an assassination attempt, and I'll tell you why later, but that's when that other individual was arrested without firing a shot. So 159 years of history, 43 documented assassination attempts. Documented. That's important to know. Thousands of plots disrupted. I could attest to that because I can't tell you the details, but I've investigated and arrested and been a part of disrupting, not thousands, but a lot of them. And, part of the Secret Service mission, as I mentioned, investigating counterfeit currency. We're the only federal law enforcement agency with a dual mission. Protection and investigation. So not only do we protect the President of the United States, we protect the nation's financial infrastructure with any white-collar crime, cyber crime, and things of that nature. So it's a pretty important thing. Obviously, we're biased, but we're also the only federal agency that every agent has to have a top secret SCI, highest security clearance known to mankind, and we all have to meet that requirement to get hired. Real quick, the assassination attempts. This is important. 63, obviously we know what happened with Kennedy, then the Wallace attempt, but between 63 and 81, and we didn't include MLK and RFK in those, but you had 7 actions within about a 17-year period. My point to that is what we're going through now with the one and what we'll talk about the September 15th, it's not unprecedented. This was a violent time during these years, and there were 7 documented attempts in that time. But I think it's important to realize too, like people don't realize, do people, I keep doing that. Do people remember this one here? There's a name Francisco Duran, Pennsylvania Avenue, trench coat, AK-47, and running up and down, spraying the White House. That was that day. A friend of mine cleared the fence and tackled him to prevent any loss of life. This one too, people were shocked. We were there. Bush, the country of Georgia, guy took a hand grenade, pulled the pin, wrapped it in a handkerchief, tossed it by the grace of God. Based on the pressure of the handkerchief, it didn't detonate. But these are close calls, but these happen. then obviously we know what happened here on the 24th. So
I think it's important to note, we talk about this 17-year period from 63 to 81 with these attempts, and like Tim said, there were some other assassinations of, not necessarily political figures, but definitely civil rights individuals that played an important role in the crafting of American society that we see today. Equally important, though they weren't elected. The 60s and through the early 80s were a very violent period as well. And we think that right now, I mean, don't get me wrong, we're living in a very violent society today, but it was equally as violent in the 60s and in the 70s. I think that if you look back at July 14th of this year, Tim and I were interviewed by multiple news sources, Fox News, CNN, News Nation. We went on a podcast less than 12 hours afterwards. And both of us were asked, do you think that this is going to be a progressive behavior moving forward regarding violence towards these candidates? The short answer is yes, because I believe that we're more politically divisive today than we've ever been. And America needs to get back to center, right? We need to learn how to, apply civil discourse in our conversations to work for the betterment of America. But, Tim and I both said within 12 hours that we felt that after this assassination attempt on July 13th, that there would be additional attacks because these things like to spur other people, right? Because we live in a very volatile society. People on a day-to-day basis, we don't know what they're going through. So I think it's important to note that we're kind of seeing a replica from 63 to 81 politically, what we're seeing now in the United States. Great.
Yeah, it's a good point, Mike. So I like to remind people, because everybody says, oh, well, I could, for two things. Never ask a Secret Service agent what part of the FBI or CIA they were a part of. If you want to get me angry, ask me, like, hey, how was the FBI? Like, I don't know, ask an FBI agent. We're separate. You have the Secret Service, FBI, CIA. We're separate, distinct what we do. 10,000 people apply for the U.S. Secret Service every year. Less than 1% get hired. Actually, 0.007% get hired. I told somebody at a recent speech, I'm like, if you think you can do it better, go to USA Jobs and apply. You probably won't get hired. I say that because the age limit's 37. Everybody in the room was over 37. I wasn't taking a shot at their background, but but the point is it's very hard to get hired. There's only 3,000 agents in the world, 3,000 that actually do the job and work and protect and investigate. We're spread out throughout the world, 120 domestic offices, 16 foreign. I was assigned to The Hague, Netherlands for a period of time. That's where Europol is located. So my duty over there at Europol was the cybercrime guy, working with our 28 EU colleagues with a mutual legal assistance treaty, which basically allowed me law enforcement rights in 28 countries. And we'd go kick in doors of people committing crimes to Americans that lived overseas. So you can't hide, which is beautiful. Mike and I, we're good enough friends. We talk about this all the time. Any military people in here, we have MOSs, which is like military occupational specialty. So he was a counter assault guy, the guys with the BDUs and the big guns. I was a transportation guy that I drove the limos and I did the motorcade route. So I always tell him, I drove you to where you got to go. I allowed you to be in my motorcade.
But they were always the guys that were in a fetal position. We'd have to come and hey, are you okay, sir? Can we help you? And give him a handkerchief to wipe his tears.
But within the Secret Service, it's hard enough to get hired. Then of the 3,000 agents, only 10% go to the president or vice president's detail. So everybody joins the Secret Service to go to the president's detail. Not everybody goes, because once you get hired, then it becomes more selective. Then once you go to the detail, then it becomes more selective. So he mentioned about 650 CAT agents, CAT, counter assault. Transportation and counter assault are probably the two most elite within the Secret Service. And I mention this because he's a gun guy. Well, so am I, but I was a firearms instructor before I went to the detail, and we had to be proficient and qualified with 4 weapons. MP5 submachine gun for close quarters combat, obviously a pistol, at the time 6-hour 229, 357, and then a long run that could reach out and touch somebody about 700 yards, SR 16, which is like an M4, than the
Remington
standard Remington 870 shotgun. As Secret Service agents, we had to qualify every month. So therefore, I hate shooting. For 25 years, I had to shoot every month, thousands of rounds. I don't care if I ever shoot. I mean, we hunt. Hunting is different, but I hate shooting.
Yeah, but do you want to tell them about the percentage requirements?
Oh, well,
the difference?
We're 80%, they were 90.
Okay,
so,
all right.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to conveniently leave that part off.
And I will say something personal. We're obviously, you can tell we're really good friends, and we have a whole network of guys that we talk like this to each other every day. But before Thanksgiving, Mike hosted us down in Texas for a big hunting trip, and we hunted in the morning and afternoon and at night, hogs at night. But you know what we did during the day, because we're retired Secret Service agents? We had shooting competitions, because like it was all like, who's better, you know? So we can't.
Who still has it?
Well, they do. But, but this is just some of the training that goes into it. 2 academies, 6 months, curriculum, legal. I didn't go to stay at a Holiday Inn, but I've had enough legal training and arrested enough people, spent enough time in federal court. I know a lot about law, as does Mike. PT, people that know me, well, that story with Logan with physical fitness. I was a college athlete, and that's never left me. Like Mike and I have talked about, the reason why you have to be in shape, because until you've been on the ground fighting for your life, and you realize, like, man, I should have done some extra PT or some extra working out. Like, that's what keeps you going, because literally, like, we've been in those fights for our life with other individuals or groups of individuals. So that's why we have stringent physical fitness requirements.
Well, Tim's being very humble also. What he won't tell you is he's documented as in history, one of the fastest Secret Service agents ever, running about a 7:15 mile and a half. And we used to think that we were really good running about a 9-minute mile and a half. And so he's also done 68 marathons.
Yeah.
So
we're also kind
very
of
humble.
insane. So
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I was talking to somebody earlier about defensive tactics, controlled tactics. I was a wrestler in college, so the controlled tactics come naturally for me. But you have to be able to submit, hold, restrain, arrest people. We're trained up to EMTs. That's come in handy a few times in my career. I think in my career, probably 36 times, trauma, I won't get into the gory details, but as far as like CPR, I got a life-saving award for saving one of Shinzo Abe's guys in New York City back in like 16, I think it was. And I don't say that to like, oh, look at me, I got a life-saving award. I keep that on my wall as a reminder for all those ones that I couldn't save, the other 31 times. So it's important for the EMT training. Again, this is me. That's protective operations driving course. I went to 2 schools, one being a race car driving school, then our own driving school where you learn to do the cool J-turns. Speaking of golf, I used to do J-turns on the golf course with Obama. It's really, really hard to do. And my kids, Susan knows, my kids are 11, 10, and 5, or 6. And every time I get in the car and I hit the Ladue Road and I'm taking them to school, they're like, Dad, you're not driving the president anymore. Slow down. Every time I get in the car, I'm going through the motions like, hey, I'm taking, more importantly, I have my kids, I'm telling you. The most nervous I've ever been driving was from Mobap back to my house over here down the road, because I had my first kid in the car. I was like 40 miles an hour on the right lane of Highway 40. But continuous training, like Mike said, throughout our careers, we trained with Delta, SEAL, Special Forces, you name them, we did it. And it was an honor. And those guys are awesome as well to train with. He had more training in that than I did. But I already said this, but this is important. If you don't take one thing away from today, right there, don't ever bring up the FBI to us. So anyway, we'll get there. We did pretty good. And now we want to rip it out for any question, whatever the question is. I know Logan will kick us off. The July 13th situation, you probably might start. But if anybody has any questions, the floor is yours. There's one right there. Okay, I'll let Logan decide.
One here and one here.
Who was in front?
Let's go here. He saw her first.
Great job. This is so interesting.
Thank you.
Which president in recent history has had the most threats against them? And were you nervous to watch this?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so which president in history has had the most threats against them, and were you nervous? I'll answer that second part real quick. I'm not a tough guy by any means, but I don't have any fear. I'm at peace with, and I will say this, for 25 years, I would leave the house, and rule number one of law enforcement is coming home. And for 25 years, I would say bye to my family and kids, not knowing if I'd ever see them again. But I was okay with that, because you know what? Everybody in this room expects that from us, and I took an oath on the Constitution. So to answer your question, I didn't have any fear, because I wouldn't do anything reckless, but I would do my job. So as far as threats go, everybody thinks like, oh, it was Obama because he was an African American. That's not true. Honestly, it's about equal. If you looked at, and I'm not going to share all the details, but if you looked at the course of the 5 presidents I protected in my career, from Clinton to Biden, it was on par, with the caveat of, you could see when Facebook and social media took over, it was like this, then it was like this, because we all know, and part of my language, but everybody's a badass behind the computer until they get a Secret Service agent knocking on their door. Hey, did you send this Facebook post? Yeah. So Facebook and social media changed everything, because everybody's a tough guy behind the computer. So long-winded answer, but it's kind of even, but social media made it go through the roof.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question I had is, why don't presidents wear bulletproof vests?
Sometimes they do. Yes, ma'am. It depends. I mean, a lot of the things that we do, intelligence will dictate the response. So there are a lot of other hidden resources that we have, some of them being ballistic vests, some of them being ballistic blankets. One of the things that Tim talked about yesterday, if you look at the July 13th incident, President Trump hit what we call the deck, hit the stage after the second shot, which is the one that hit him in the ear. Shooter thought that he actually killed him. I mean, we don't know. We didn't ask him, but we're assuming that's what happened. He couldn't answer those questions, thank God. But there are other resources, and in that particular situation, if you look at the stage, there's an elevated border along the stage. That's ballistic material that's there and designed. There's a whole lot of other things that you will never see and that we can't disclose. Those are things that are pretty common knowledge, but there are other things there. But he does, or she, well, former vice president now, they do have their own ballistic vests.
I got to jump in real quick. New York City, after 9/11, 43 throwing out the first pitch was the best first pitch ever in the history of presidents. But he was complaining like, oh, I can't throw the pitch with this thing on. But he had to wear a vest, because we're talking 9/11. He's out in 60,000 people. That's why he wore that big old sweatshirt, the FDNY sweatshirt. Because Derek Jeter's like, sir, they're going to boo you unless you throw it from the top of the mountain. But he had a vest on that day, so.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who maybe have mental illnesses or mentally unstable. And so how can you tell, like, if it's a serious threat or just, people, don't know?
Great question. In my career, I was part of the Washington field office, and I spent some time in protective intelligence. So we had a truck called Prowler, and our duty for 8 to 12 hours a day, we sat on Pennsylvania Avenue. Because you just sit there and you wait, they're gonna show up. Anybody that wants to talk to the president, hey, I'm a relative, or I had tinfoil on my head.
Here's a letter.
So to answer your question, in my career, I've interviewed, I didn't count, but thousands of people that articulated threats to the President of the United States. And of those thousands I've interviewed, sitting across the table and looking somebody in the eye, the hair on the back of my neck has gone up about 24 times. We're like, holy, you know what? This person can do it. They have the means, the motive, and the opportunity besides mental health. And obviously, we take this, it's a big deal constitutionally to arrest somebody, and that's why we have to know so much have a legal authority. But to get somebody involuntarily committed to a mental institution is harder than arresting somebody. And I've involuntarily committed probably 50 people in my career who have major mental issues.
I will tell you that there is a large majority of those threats that are made, like Tim said, means, capabilities, intent, that mental health is a true reason why they're exhibiting these behaviors. And so, that's what we bring to the schools every day. These are the things that we talk about as tactics are great. having law enforcement presence as a deterrent are great. But really, when we boil down to it, all of these things that we see, whether it be at the presidential level or down at a school level, they can be prevented. We just have to be better at observing these behaviors and having resources. And instead of investing all of this money at Congress to buy ballistic shields, all of those things are reactive in nature after an event has already happened. Let's take that money and let's invest it in those mental health resources on a day-to-day basis, because that's what's going to save our kids.
Well, I know Logan wants the next question,
I know.
But it goes back to my quote. I know nobody's in law enforcement here, I think, but you could be a part of the solution. You see something that's odd, see something, say something. You know, people saw this guy who assassinated the United Healthcare. People knew everything's out there. Nobody said anything. All this could be prevented.
In the other room.
Hi, when you were talking earlier about the Shinzo assassination, surprised to hear that they don't have a dedicated kind of version of the Secret Service. Is the Secret Service of the United States pretty unique across the world for having a dedicated protective force, or are there other versions of it?
Well, there's other versions, and Mike and I've worked. The Israeli version is Shin Bet. I've worked with Shin Bet, IDF, Mossad, which are intelligence as well. But Shin Bet is the closest thing to us. I've been with Putin, Ahmadinejad, the Iranians. Like, everybody has their version of, we're the Iranian Secret Service, we're the Russian. I'll be honest with you, they all take a backseat to us. When we go over there, like when they come over here, we protect their leader. When we go over there, we protect our leader. Like hey, we let one guy ride in our truck. Hey, play nice. They have their what they call, but like I said, Metropolitan Police, the UK. I did a lot with Tony Blair back in the day, and they're London Metropolitan Police officers. And no shot at cops. I used to be a cop, but cops' mentalities are different than us. Cops are reactive. We're proactive.
Well, I think it was important to let him answer that one. I thought you were going to get more into the Abe assassination, but it goes back to what I talk about is pre-attack behaviors. They're super important for us to pay attention to as Americans. They're always there. Abe, that individual expressed unusual concern or concerning behaviors or unusual interest towards Abe. What separates us versus some of these other entities is our assertiveness. We just take action, right? We make a choice, we make a decision, and we've been told in our whole training, listen, make a decision. If you make a decision and it's the wrong decision, fix it. Be flexible, adapt, overcome to whatever's in front of you. I truly believe that Abe could have been saved if their Secret Service and those that were surrounding him, they knew, and if you watch the video, they know that he's a person of interest and he's exhibiting signs and symptoms of behavior, but no one wanted to put their hands on him. We would have tackled him. We would have put our hands on him. We would have detained him. That's the difference. After traveling to all these countries, one of the things that I pulled away from all these other elite groups is they're so apprehensive. You can't wait on them to do something to respond. You have to be proactive and preventative and initiate that. So, sorry.
Yeah, the question is how and why back in July assassination attempt did it occur? And then when you think about that, also, where do you see technology impacting what has had and where we're going to go in the future?
Yeah, this is. I'll jump in real quick. So, why did it occur? So, a lot of people fail, and I was on a podcast on Tuesday, and that bipartisan report came out, and the leader of the podcast was like, "We want Tim Reboulet to talk about this bombshell report." I go, "Hold on, man. There's nothing bombshell about this." Like Mike said, we less than 12 hours after the July 13th attempt, we articulated everything that happened. And let me be clear, it was a complete and total failure by the Secret Service. And I'm tired of saying that. And the Secret Services, Ron Rowe, I was on the president's detail, he's the interim director. What happened, a lot of people don't realize, Butler, PA's here, Pittsburgh's here, Philly's here. First Lady simultaneously of the United States was in Pittsburgh. You had a bunch of agents there. The Vice President of the United States and the candidate for the Democratic Party was in Philly. A bunch of agents there. All Pennsylvania State Police. They just had a NATO summit, which is the National Special Security event deemed by Congress. So you had the entire Secret Service there, traveling up to Milwaukee the next day for the RNC. So nobody's talked about assets were spread way too thin. The actual agents standing posts, I believe there was 21 U.S. Secret Service posts, and you had over 100 cops. The 21 post standers, as we call them, were non-Secret Service agents. They were DHS, HSI agents, good people, but they don't know the first thing about standing posts and protection. So that's a huge failure. Then what happened is they cleaned out the Pittsburgh field office. I know the special agent in charge really well, who would have signed off on that. They had very junior agents conducting the advance. And as we all know, as a site agent, first thing you do, all right, you said you walk the steps of the protectee. I would have walked up to the stage, and the first thing I do, I'm not even thinking shots. I'd be like, hey, the AGR building, that's way too close. What's the blast radius? My mind is thinking, what could a pressure cooker do? What can an IED do? And what can a Timothy McVeigh Ryder truck bomb do? And all three of those from that distance would kill people. And I would have created that site from a mental aspect of an explosive. Obviously, taking the long range shot, like that's a given. And all these things were just completely missed. And not to throw local law enforcement under the bus, they didn't follow the post instructions. That was posted by law enforcement. It was too hot, so they went inside. The window where they went inside had a view of the roof. When all that chatter was going on and wasn't communicated to us, communication was a failure too. When all that chatter was going on and the communication it wasn't even a threat, a suspicious person, those agents, and I'm going like this, thinking like I'm looking through that window, those two officers, cardinal sin number one, they left their post. So a lot of failures, everybody's at fault. We've taken the brunt of it, but a lot of people failed.
Let me interject. I know we're supposed to go one, but I do have to point this out. So the same people that are pointing their fingers at the Secret Service saying that we failed are the same ones who are responsible. And what I mean by that is for 20 plus years, the United States Secret Service has been going to Congress and the Senate saying we need more assets, we need more resources, we need more financial resources to do our job effectively. And they continue to add responsibilities to the men and women of the Secret Service. So, for me, I take offense to it that, in all these hearings, you have these politicians, these congressmen and senators that are politically grandstanding to prove a point, to further their career, instead of doing what's right to protect American democracy. And so I will say that I believe that that is a failure as well. We take our responsibility like men and women of the United States Secret Service, but I think that's one of the issues that no one wants to talk about.
Shouldn't that have been something Marcus advocated for?
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
So a week after.
Where is he?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So a week after I was on Fox News, and I said that thing. I said, "Where the hell have Mayorkas been? Where has Merrick Garland been?"
Yep.
Because I say Mayorkas because DHS. Where has he been? MIA. Then I mentioned Merrick Garland because there's an MOU with assassination attempts. We turn the investigation over to the FBI. So don't hold us accountable for their investigation of the lack of information sharing. It has nothing to do with the Secret Service. Where the hell is Merrick Garland? So those two guys are MIA. This isn't political, but just do your damn job is all I'm saying.
I think we have some.
Could you guys describe what you all are doing for the middle and high schools? Your jobs that you're doing now, what kind of procedure, what you're trying to attempt?
Yeah, so great question. So it's so I'm with Ladue School District. Mike is a national expert with K-12 safety and security. So after this, we're actually going to go do some work for Ladue to keep the kids safe. But there's a laundry list of things to do to start with. Training, education, and culture. All these things are free. You would like, if anybody lives in Ladue, you're not paying. I'm trying to get more training, educate the staff and the kids, to include 3 of my own, and have a little shift in the culture. But ultimately, we don't have enough time to go into all the details of everything I'm doing, but the 4 keys to school safety: securable spaces, lock the doors, securable vestibules, communication, standard response protocol, and the biggest, most important thing, which we talked about with these assassination attempts, we're bringing in the behavioral threat assessment to the schools, because every school shooter, I've studied every school shooting, and does anybody know when the first school shooting happened, documented? 1764. 1764. And you know what? 260 years, I'm tired of it. It's got to end. So we're working nationally to put an end to it. But the behavioral risk assessment is vital because like these assassins, these kids exhibit signs and symptoms and warning behaviors before they do it. Human nature, people don't go from nonviolent to violent like that. There's a thing called the pathway to violence, and everything starts with a grievance. In schools, I'm getting bullied. You know what? I have a grievance. I have ideation. This kid's bullying me. I want to kill him. Ideation, preparation, planning, research, probing, execution. So you got to get the kids on the pathway to violence, and that's what I'm trying to do through quantifiable means, working with Mike, then people throughout the nation. I know there was a lot, but hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak with you as well. I'm currently the national vice chairman of the National Council for School Safety Directors, and so Tim and his team actually hired us to come in this summer and put together a strategic plan moving forward. And you know, for me, it's all about the behavioral components. I believe that in 99% of these cases can be prevented if we're paying attention to the behaviors. The industry itself, it's a $3 billion industry, and the industry will tell you that you need to buy more metal detectors and more weapons detection and all of these other things. Those are all post-event. So what are we doing to prevent on the front side? So I'd be happy to speak with you after that, sir. Sorry.
Tim, Mike, first, thank you very much for a very informative presentation. Thank you for what you do and have done. Back to July 13th for a moment. You pointed out services or assets were spread across a number of different sites. You had junior officers, you touched on that. Is it true that there was no communication coordination between the forces that were there? Local police, state police, Secret Service, and the others. It's my understanding that there was no central communication point so that when reports were being made of a possible intruder, that I didn't know what Mike was doing and the left didn't know what the right was doing. Comment, please.
Yeah, this is going to be definitely a two-parter, but yeah, so when the initial, so yes, it's standard operating procedures. It's like protection 101 for us. Every site has a security room. Every city of that site has a CP or a command post. So that happened in Butler, PA. The command post was limited though to PSP, which is Pennsylvania State Police and the U.S. Secret Service. And don't take this the wrong way, but a lot of places where we go throughout the country and or the world, like the Butler PAs, the Beaver counties, they're like podunk small town PDs. God bless them, but we asked them to do a job. They're more as spectators. Like, I get to see the president. Well, you're there to help us is what you're doing. So my point is with them, they offered to fly a drone. We're like, no, we're good. We're good because they were gonna fly a drone for the protective mission. They're gonna fly a drone most likely like, hey, we got the president So we had to take these things into account and like, all right, guys, you guys got this outer perimeter, just stand opposed. And I could speak to you like as a transportation guy, the amount of times I would have to talk to cops. We're driving down the road, they're looking, saluting. That's great, you wanna salute the president, but the threat's coming from over here. So my point being is they weren't really there to be a part of the solution. They actually were, just spectators, if you will. So we did have a command post, and when those outer ring folks, they should have communicated, but the way we operate, you have a suspicious person, a person of interest, and a lookout. The word threat was never used. When it was used, within 15.5 seconds, the threat was dead. So as soon as they said a threat, we killed them. But they were using the wrong terminology too. So it was just a complete failure on their part. And I will say that. It was a complete failure on their part of correctly articulating what the problem was. So.
Yeah, we do know that 33 minutes prior to the shots being fired that this individual was on the radar of local officials. That was never conveyed to our command post and then to our security room. And so with security room at that site was actually what we call the follow-up vehicle. So that was never communicated. So yes, communication was an absolute failure.
That's extraordinary.
Well, let me add too.
Yeah.
25 years in law enforcement. I started in the mid 90s. And like most of y'all, like kids nowadays, and I'm going to sound like the old guy, like that, the dad commercial. People like live in this world. You know what? What happened to looking somebody in the eye? Hey, bro, what's up? What's wrong with you? Go do your damn job. Instead of like, hey, texting, I got a suspicious guy. Let me text you a photo. Get off your ass. Go talk to the guy. Look him in the eye. And I know human nature, behavior, and body language. If they would have done that, we wouldn't be talking about this. Be a cop, do your job. Yeah. And they texted everything, but nobody went.
Oh, they even
and talked to
texted
him.
that they saw him, what we call tailgating, coming through the gate in a secure area, that an officer texted another officer and said, hey, a guy just tailgated me coming through the secure area. Well, why did you not get out and stop him and ask him what he was doing? So, and then as that developed, what we know is that there's other communication of them saying, oh, this same guy who was suspicious, who was tailgating, coming through the secure area, is now walking around with a rangefinder. Probably ought to get up off your tail and go do something, So, listen, I'm not pointing the finger at Beaver County or Butler or whatever. Well, I'm trying to be politically correct, Tim. But there's absolutely failures on all three of those agencies. It's a catastrophic failure, but these are communications problems that we, myself, Tim, other individuals like us, have been communicating to our to our supervisors who've been communicating to Congress. We need to fix this. We need to have streamlined communication so that these problems don't happen. And guess what? It came back to bite us.
And I shared this yesterday. And again, I'm not looking for a gold star, but I've survived 3 terrorist attacks. And the biggest thing that we learned from those 3 terrorist attacks where I provided the information, communication. Communication goes down. If you're ever in a situation, you're at Busch Stadium, or God forbid if something happens, throw your cell phone out the window because it ain't going to work because those towers get overloaded. So communication goes right out the window for law enforcement included.
One last one.
My question has to do with guns. We talk about all this stuff. You guys are doing a great presentation. I really appreciate it. But I want to know about the guns because it seems like we stopped talking about that a while ago. We're really good at giving sympathy and offering prayers to parents that lose kids in these school shootings. What are we doing about guns and trying to better the rules and regulations on people buying guns and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so has anybody seen the movie Shane? One of the best movies ever. Shane, the quote in that movie is like, Shane, a gun is no different than any other tool. A rake, a shovel. It's as good or bad as the person using it. So it's not the gun that shoots and pulls the trigger and kills people. It's the person behind it. And this all ties back to the behavioral risk, the mental health, and the proactiveness beside it. And what happens every time there's a school shooting, you have pro-Second Amendment and people that don't like the Second Amendment, and we lose sight of the kids that have lost their lives and the staff members, and it becomes a gun control thing. Let's talk about the people that got the gun that should not have. It's not the gun, it's the person.
Let me add to that real quick, and I know we're short on time. So I get asked this question all the time. Do we have a gun problem in America, or do we have a mental health problem in America? And I always say we have a both problem in America. I am a registered Republican. I do plan on running for Congress at some point in the next 2 to 4 years. As a registered Republican, I'm a Second Amendment advocate, but what I will tell you is I do believe that we need tougher restrictions on weapons and who has access to those weapons. One of the things that I've been doing in Texas, I've written and assisted writing 2 bills in Texas for school security. One is a victims advocate bill. The other one is a school security bill. One of the things that we need to be talking about is people who believe in the Second Amendment know that rule number 1 to owning a weapon is securing that weapon, making sure it doesn't get in the hands of the wrong people. These weapons getting in the hands of children, those people need to be held accountable for that allow that. And so it should no longer be a misdemeanor that if you have a weapon and your child gets it and kills someone with it, that you could potentially face a misdemeanor charge. There needs to be tougher accountability and laws written for that. And so what I will tell you is that we have a both problem in America. And the sooner that we come together as Republicans and Democrats and independents alike and start making legislative efforts to make a safer place for all of Americans, the better we'll be. Sorry.
How about assault rifles? Just one last, why can't we ban them? Who needs an assault rifle?
Just 1 second.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the question, but
Yeah.
we do have a lot of people here who have to get to meetings and other things.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
these guys are
We'll
gonna
talk afterwards.
Yeah,
We'll
these guys
stay.
are going to stay up here. We
Yeah.
also have all the Argent portfolio managers here to take questions if you have on investments. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for have a wonderful holiday. Happy New Year. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Thank you both.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.